Alright, guys, I'm back, I guess. So, happy holidays, by the way. I don't usually bring that up in my videos, but, might as well. Stay safe in this crazy world of ours. Um, uh, alright, so, this is some crazy shit. You remember what Texas Governor Greg Abbott was doing, uh, leaving kids to be stranded in the Rio Grande and denying them of water and food, and you know, essentially barring them while stranded in the water. All right, so Texas Governor Greg Abbott on Monday signed a legislation that makes it a criminal offense to enter the state illegally, setting a potential clash with President Biden's administration over immigration policy and border enforcement. Abbott, a Republican who has implemented other policies directed at migrants, have drawn court challenges, signed the bill at an event in Brownsville, Texas. Quote, Biden's deliberate inaction has left Texas to fend for itself, Abbott said, adding that the bill's goal was to, quote, stop the tidal wave of illegal entry into Texas. So, you're right, I was already going to bring this up, but it says it right here anyways. And this might also be off topic. Aside from it being a federal crime for them coming into illegal ports, people who employ them would also be fined if you're caught hiring under the table, I believe. I read that in the Birth Earth. This isn't even like something that's fishy. This isn't a conspiracy. Like, there's a lot of people who consider demographers racist, but most of them say that, or at least they would say that they don't take our jobs and just, so. And so most people want to do this legally, you know, doing it through asylum, I think it is meant to look sketchy because you literally just have to cross. You don't dial a phone number before you do it. Okay, so Abbott's signature comes after the Republican-controlled state legislature voted last month to approve the measure, and as negotiators in Washington try to hammer out an immigration deal with Republicans are insisting on the exchange for additional aid to Ukraine and Israel, a high priority for the White House. Oh, right, and children are also like expected to go without their parents, I guess, because I don't know what the catch is there, but yeah, there are situations where kids just have to just go and cross the border, and it's not illegal, but because citizens are just going with what the politicians are saying, this is like you're just making them weary of any immigration that comes in at that point. All right, so the new law also comes amid record crossings of the southern border. Two Department of Homeland Security officials said U.S. border agents apprehended over 12,000 immigrants attempting to cross on Monday, a new record with nearly 11,000 of them trying to cross illegally between ports of entry. The previous record of just under 12,000 was set 2 weeks. The busiest sectors continue to be Tucson, Arizona, and Del Rio, Texas. In recent years, local authorities in Texas have been arresting migrants on state misdemeanor charges of criminal trespassing under Abbott's border enforcement program known as Operation Lone Star. The law signed Monday makes it a misdemeanor to enter or attempt to enter Texas from a foreign country or enter location other than a lawful port of entry. It is scheduled to go into effect in March. So despite it already being federally illegal, I wonder what the extra step of enforcement is just going to be. Like, this doesn't really make much sense. A Justice Department spokesman did not immediately respond to the request for comment Monday night on whether the DOJ planned to sue Texas over the new law. White House spokesperson Angelo Hernandez called the measure an extreme law that make communities in Texas less safe, adding that the federal government, rather than states, is charged with determining how and when to remove non-citizens from violating immigration laws. A group of 21 Texas Democrats and members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus signed a letter Monday asking the Justice Department to step in and block the new law, which it described as, quote, the most extreme anti-immigrant state law. Yeah, how are you arresting them? Like, I was having this debate last night with my husband. Like, uh, he said that immigrants generally in the past got arrested, but um, being detained in like facilities, like um, border patrol facility, like I don't think that's being like arrested like prison. But if it is, like, I feel like those, unfortunately, the cages that immigrants go in, like, that's for a lack of infrastructure, but it's the most callous, optically looking thing you could ever do to someone. So, like, I guess I'll go with they do technically go to prison, but it's not considered a prison despite them being behind cages sometimes. All right. The American Civil Liberties Union of Texas, the ACLU, and Texas Civil Rights Project filed a lawsuit Tuesday to block enactment of the law. The law is the Texas governor's latest attempt to deter migrant crossings through state inaction. Abbott previously ordered the installment of a 1,000-foot floating barrier near Eagle Pass, Texas, and for placement of razor wire. Oh, I forgot about this razor wire thing. And so that would play into them going back to the Rio Grande while they're trapped in the razor wire. I believe I did read something in an article that was saying that. Anyways, both of those efforts were rejected in court, with the federal courts ruling this month that the state must remove the buoy barrier, and the federal court rejected Abbott's request last month through the federal authorities from removing the razor wire. Yeah, of course he's going to deny it, and they're just going to go back and forth and say, yeah, you must do it, and he's going to be like, no, and like, double, you must do it, and he's like, double, no, like, how, like, come on. Oh, right, and Abbott's office bust thousands of migrants out of Texas since last month to cities near. Okay, so he basically did this to like sanctuary states for where migrants usually go, but the issue is that he knows they're being sent to places where there's a lack of infrastructure, and he's doing this on purpose to basically get back at the Democrats. And remember when he stranded them on that island, but luckily people were able to help, even though he expected them to be stranded. All right. So this is the regime we have to look forward to, guys. All right, moving on. So we've heard about this before. And back to Trump, obviously. Sweeping raids, giant camps, and mass deportations inside Trump's 2025 immigration plan. So I technically wanted to read this to you guys because you could flat out just read this. But I think I'll save that for another video. This might delve into that a little bit, though. If he regains power, Donald Trump wants not only to revive some of the immigration policies criticized as draconian during his presidency, but expand and toughen them. So this could be not only for a logical, obvious shit like lack of infrastructure, but this could be like resource allocation depression of the wages, which is a myth. It's in the hand of the wealthy, not people coming in and the citizens down below. So this is a very fucked up situation that somebody would extrapolate even to this day, that immigration depresses wages, and I believe that's the issue why family size has declined a little bit, because of the myth of depression, wages, and unsustainability. So it is a little bit of a manipulation strategy to incentivize you to have less kids, despite basically agriculture changing and having less kids because of women working. So there is moral reasons for why. I forgot what my main point was, but the anti-immigration policies outside of infrastructure issues are purely just a racist tactic, a suppression myth, and like I would say, like most of these people are probably coming over from environmental impacts. Anyways, former President Donald Trump is planning an extreme expansion of his first-term crackdown on immigration if he returns to power in 2025, including preparing to round up undocumented people already in the United States on a vast scale and detain them in sprawling camps they wait to be expelled. So in a book I read that, like, when they were repatriating Mexican immigrants, half of them were illegal. Um, so they just kind of send you back whether or not you're illegal or not. This is historically actually just known, actually, which is really fucked up. Like you can't just screen people individually. You just, I mean, technically you do. Like it's gonna have to be that way. Like if there's technology that they can't just send people away if they're legal. But historically, that has been the case. People have been repatriated and their livelihoods have been ruined. People have been well known in the United States or have all of a sudden been like uh, treated like shit. So, all right. The plan would sharply restrict both legal and illegal immigration in a multitude of ways. Mr. Trump wants to revive his first term border policies, including banning entry by people from certain Muslim majority nations and reimposing COVID-19 era policy of refusing asylum claims. Sorry about that. Though this time he would base that refusal on assertions that migrants carry other infectious diseases like tuberculosis. Well-known eugenic myth that uh, people automatically just have diseases, by the way. Like, you would think that people would be vaccinated and so then given the chance to come in. This has nothing to do with the migrant themselves. Okay. He plans to scour the country for unauthorized immigrants and deport people by millions per year. To help speed mass deportation, Mr. Trump is preparing an enormous expansion of a form of removal that does not require due process hearings. Oh, well, I was wondering about that actually, but go figure. To help immigration and customs enforcement carry out sweeping raids, he plans to resign other federal agents and deputize legal police officers and National Guard soldiers voluntarily contributed by Republican-run states. To ease the strain on ICE detention facilities, Mr. Trump wants to build huge camps to detain people while their cases are processed, and they await deportation flights, and to get around any refusal by Congress to appropriate the necessary funds, Mr. Trump would redirect money in the military budget, and he did it in his first term to spend more on a border wall than Congress had authorized. So the military budget is huge on its own. I doubt this will really impact it that much. It's just overall the money that's being wasted on the military budget or with technology that just lays around and we sometimes don't even use that, I hear. Like this could be going to citizens and like paychecks and whatever, but obviously it's being funneled into other unnecessary things, I guess. Corruption and fascism, apparently. In a public reference to his plans, Mr. Trump told a crowd in Iowa in September, quote, following the Eisenhower model, he will carry out the largest domestic deportation operation in American history, end quote. The reference was to a 1954 campaign to round up and expel Mexican immigrants that was named for the ethnic slur Operation, yeah. Not sure if that's TOS. The constellation of Mr. Trump's 2025 plans amounts to an assault on immigration on a scale unseen in modern American history. Millions of undocumented immigrants would be barred from the country or uprooted from it years or even decades after settling here. Such a scale of planned removals would raise logistical, financial, and diplomatic challenges and would be vigorously challenged in court. But there is no mistaking the breadth and ambition of the shift Mr. Trump is eyeing. Oh, sorry about that. What the hell? Okay. In a second Trump presidency, the visas of foreign students who participated in the anti-Israel or pro-Palestine protests would be canceled. Jeez. U.S. Consular officials abroad will be directed to expand ideological screening of visa applicants to block people the Trump administration considers to have undesirable attitudes. People who were granted temporary protected status because they are from certain countries deemed unsafe, allowing them to lawfully live and work in the United States would have that status revoked. So, again, guys, this is happening. I think I've said that before, and you've seen it otherwise. I swear you've probably seen it otherwhere or other places. Don't know why I'm misspeaking like that. This is just nuts. All right. It just I can sort of see this. I absolutely kind of guessed it that this would go against screening and it would just go by the wayside in some sort of way. But absolutely revoking people who have who might not have anything to do with being an immigrant, like, geez, at the point of like third, fourth generation, it's not even worth bringing up that you have immigration association, especially if it's not something you're necessarily like thinking about all the time. All right. Similarly, numerous people who have been allowed to live in the country temporarily for humanitarian reasons would also lose that status and be kicked out, including tens of thousands of the Afghans who were evacuated amid the 2021 Taliban takeover and allowed to enter the United States. Afghans holding special visas granted to people who helped U.S. forces will be re-vetoed to see if they really did. And Mr. Trump would try to end birthright citizenship for babies born in the United States to undocumented parents by proclaiming that policy to be the new position of the government and by ordering agencies to cease issuing citizenship affirming documents like social security cards and passports to them. The policy's legal legitimacy, like nearly all of Mr. Trump's plans, would be virtually certain to end before the Supreme Court. In interviews with the New York Times, several Trump advisors gave the most expansive and detailed description of Mr. Trump's immigration agenda in the potential second term. In particular, Mr. Trump's campaign referred questions for this article to Stephen Miller, an architect of Mr. Trump's first-term immigration policies, who remained close to him and is expected to serve in a senior role in the second administration. All of the steps Trump's advisors are preparing, Mr. Miller contended in a wide-ranging interview, rely on existing statutes, while the Trump team would likely see a revamp of immigration laws and a plan was crafted to need no new substantive legislation, and while acknowledging that lawsuit would arise to challenge nearly every one of them, he portrayed the Trump team's daunting array of tactics as a blitz designed to overwhelm immigrant law rights liars. All right, this is almost getting to what I already read before, but this is interesting. Okay, quote, any activists who doubt President Trump's resolve in the slightest are making a drastic error. Trump will unleash the vast arsenal of federal powers to implement the most spectacular migration crackdown, end quote, Miller said, adding, the immigration legal activists won't know what's happening. Todd Schultz, the president of FWD.US, an immigration and criminal justice advocacy group that repeatedly fought the Trump administration, said the Trump team's plan relied on xenophobic demagoguery that appeals to his hardest core political base. Yeah. Quote, Americans should understand these policy proposals are an authoritarian, often illegal agenda that would rip apart nearly every aspect of American life, tanking the economy, violating the basic civil rights of millions of immigrants and native-born immigrants alike, Mr. Schultz said. That's actually true. I kind of didn't think about it like that in terms of how we would try to deal with the aging and shrinking of our nations. If you just take away immigration, it really would harm the economy. Like, no joke. That's just insanity. All right. Poisoning the blood. Since Mr. Trump left office, the political environment on immigration was moved in his direction. Okay, so again, you take away immigrants and it's still aging and shrinking, and there's no one to take care of the elderly that are still sick, possibly being taken care of by an immigrant, and that uh, elderly person is still working while still like somehow being taken care of because they're still fragile. But soon as they're gone, like there's no one going to take care of that elderly person. So the Medicare or whatever system, the way people take care of each other, unless we're just going to build robots, you can't just support somebody with money. Like you need to physically help them too. All right. Since Mr. Trump left off, okay, he is also more credible now of exploiting that environment if he is re-elected than he was when he first won election as an outsider. The ebbing of the COVID-19 pandemic and resumption of travel flows have helped stir a global migrant crisis, with millions of Venezuelans and Central Americans fleeing turmoil, and Africans arriving in Latin American countries before continuing their journey north. Amid the record numbers of migrants at the southern border and beyond in its cities like New York and Chicago, voters are frustrated, and even some Democrats are calling for tougher action against immigrants and pressuring the White House to better manage the crisis. Mr. Trump and his advisors see the opening and know better how to seize it. The aides Mr. Trump relied upon in the chaotic early days of his first terms were sometimes at odds and lacked experience in how to manipulate the levers of federal power. By the end of his first term, the cabinet officials and lawyers who sought to restrain some of his actions, like his Homeland Security Secretary and Chief of Staff John F. Kelly, had been fired, and those who stuck with him had learned much. In his second term, Mr. Trump's plans to install a team that will not restrain him. Yeah, okay. You just have some literal brain dead people working for you at that point who can't even think for themselves. Okay. Since much of Mr. Trump's first term immigration crackdown was tied up in the court, the legal environment was titled in his favor. His 4 years of judicial appointments left behind federal appellate courts and Supreme Court that are far more conservative than the courts that heard challenges in his first term policies. The fight over deferred action for childhood arrivals provides an illustration. DACA is an Obama-era program that shields from deportation and grants work permits to people who are brought unlawfully to the United States as children. Nice. Mr. Trump tried to end it, but the Supreme Court blocked him on procedural grounds in June 2020. I mean, that is kind of nice of them, or nice of Obama to do that. Of course, Trump would just think that was just them trying to slip into the system. Again, he doesn't care about people's livelihoods and people's legitimate attempts just to live. Anyways, Mr. Miller said Mr. Trump would try again to end DACA, and the 5-4 majority of the Supreme Court that blocked the last attempt no longer exists. A few months after the DACA ruling, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and Mr. Trump replaced her with a sixth conservative, Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Mr. Trump's rhetoric has more than kept up with his increasingly extreme agenda on immigration. His stoking of fear and anger toward immigrants, pushing for border wall, and calling Mexicans rapists, fueling his 2016 takeover of the Republican Party. As president, he privately mused about developing a militarized border for Israel's asked whether migrants crossing the border could be shot in the legs, and wanted a proposed border wall topped with flesh-piercing spikes and pointed black to burn migrant skin. Jeez, that's pretty specific. As he has campaigned for the party's third straight presidential nomination, his anti-immigration immigrant tone only grew harsher. In a recent interview with the right-wing website, Mr. Trump claimed without evidence that foreign leaders were deliberately emptying their, quote, insane asylums to send the patients across America's southern border as migrants. That just sounds I'm sorry, that's funny. This is not good. This is literal fascist propaganda. I'm sorry, but that just sounds so goofy. All right. He said migrants were, quote, poisoning the blood of our country, and at a rally on Wednesday in Florida, he compared them to the fictional serial killer and Hannibal Lecter, saying, quote, that's what's coming into your country right now. Jeez. Mr. Trump had. Why is he saying Mr. Why is this article saying Mr. Trump? Like, that just sounds too respectful. Come on. Comment in the chat if you think this is kind of weird. Anyways, vowed to carry out mass deportations when running for office in 2016, but the government also managed several 100,000 removals per year under his presidency, on par with other recent administrations. If they get another opportunity, Mr. Trump and his team are determined to achieve annual numbers in the millions, keeping people out. So yeah, Obama apparently had a mass immigration policy, but I mean, this is focusing on Trump right now because he's the one that's more a mask off in terms of just like status quo, a Democrat. Okay, Mr. Trump's immigration plan is to pick up where he left off and then go much farther. He would not only revive some of the policies that were criticized as draconian during his presidency, many of which the Biden White House ended, but also expanded and toughened them. One example centers on uh, expanding first-term policies aimed at keeping people out of the country. Mr. Trump plans to suspend the nation's refugee program and once again categorically bar visitors from troubled country, reinstating a version of his ban on travel from several mostly Muslim-majority countries, which President Biden called discriminatory and ended on his first day in office. Mr. Trump would also use coercive diplomacy to induce other nations to help, including by making cooperation a condition of any other bilateral engagement. Mr. Miller said, for example, a second Trump administration would seek to reestablish an agreement with Mexico that asylum seekers remain there while their claims are processed. Quote, it is not clear that Mexico would agree. A Mexican court has said that the deal violated human rights. So when Mr. Trump, or sorry, so when Donald Trump was saying that like they're sending insane people from insane asylums, like I wonder if he made reference to, and this is why we call it asylum seekers. Like I wonder if somebody tried to like muddle the wording with that for their propaganda. Wouldn't surprise me. That'd be a missed opportunity if not. All right. Mr. Trump would also push to revive safe third country agreements with several nations in Central America and try to expand them to Africa, Asia, and South America. Under such deals, countries agreed to would be asylum take would-be asylum seekers from particular nations and let them apply for asylum there instead. While such arrangements have traditionally only covered migrants who had previously passed through the third country, federal law does not require that limit, and a second Trump administration would make those deals without it, in part as a deterrent to migrants, making the Trump team views as illegitimate asylum claims. At the same time, Mr. Miller said that Centers for Disease Control and Prevention would invoke the public health emergency powers law known as Title 42 to again refuse to hear any asylum claims by people arriving at the southern border. So I believe this is the 2025 immigration plan. This is actually what I actually read when I was poking through it one time. I don't know where to find it again, but I'm glad this is bringing this up because they're really just like pretend with Title 42 and they can just make up a new law, but you know, I don't think laws usually get destroyed anyways. They're always just like written over. Okay. The Trump administration had internally discussed that idea early in Mr. Trump's term, but some cabinet secretaries pushed back, arguing that there was no public health emergency that would legally justify it. Exactly. Basically calling people the disease, yeah, essentially. Okay. The administration ultimately implemented it during the coronavirus pandemic. saying the idea has since gained acceptance in practice. Mr. Biden initially kept the policy. Mr. Miller said Mr. Trump would invoke Title 42, quote, citing several strains of the flu, tuberculosis, scabies, and other respiratory illnesses like RSV and so on, or just a general issue of mass migration being a public health threat and conveying a variety of communicable diseases, end quote. Mr. Trump and his aides have not yet said whether they would reenact one of the most contentious deterrents to unauthorized immigration that he pursued as presidency, separating children from their parents, which led to trauma among migrants and difficulties in reuniting families. When I think I mentioned that already, but I don't think that was just in the same fashion. Okay, when pressed, Mr. Trump has repeatedly declined and ruled out reviving the policy. After an outcry over the practice, Mr. Trump ended it in 2018, and a judge later blocked the government from putting it back into effect. All right, mass deportation. Soon after Trump announced his 2024 campaign for president last November, he met with Tom Homan, who ran ICE for the first year and a half of Trump's administration and was an early proponent of separating families to deter migrants. In an interview, Mr. Homan recalled that in that meeting, he, quote, agreed to come back in a second term and, quote, help to organize and run the largest deportation operation this country's ever seen. Trump advisors' vision of abrupt mass deportation would be a recipe for the social and economic turmoil, disrupting the housing market and major industries including agricultural and the service sector. To be fair, the housing industry is just like to normies, it's already messed up. So it's just a little extra like demolishing on people's livelihoods, I guess. Mr. Miller casts such disruption in a favorable light. Quote, mass deportation will be a labor market disruption celebrated by American workers who will now be offered high wages with better benefits to fill these jobs, he said. Americans will also celebrate the fact that our nation's laws are now being applied equally and that one select group is no longer magically exempt, end quote. Wait, one group? What? I'm pretty sure the housing market isn't fucked because of migrants. Is this trying to have a connection there? All right. Literally to protect the wealthy, because I think by bringing in immigrants, they don't want to have to pay more people entering in the country, aside from the lack of infrastructure. But this has nothing to do with that at this point. This is just pure, like, like I don't even know. Like, I would just be simple-minded just to say it was pure racism. But anyways, one planned step to overcome the legal and logistical hurdles would be to significantly expand a form of fast-track deportations known as expedited removal. It denies undocumented immigrants the usual hearings and opportunities to file appeals, which can take months or years, especially when people are not in custody, and has led to a large backlog. A 1996 law says people can be subject to expedited removal for up to 2 years after arriving, but to date, the executive branch has used it more cautiously, swiftly expelling people picked up near the border soon after crossing. The Trump administration tried to expand the use of expedited removal, but a court blocked it, and then the Biden team canceled the expansion. It remained unclear whether the Supreme Court will rule it as constitutional to use the law against people who have been living for a significant period in the United States and express fear of persecution if sent home. It really does matter what the Supreme Court does say, but Trump is over here making an important call at the same time. Mr. Trump also said he would invoke an archaic law, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, to expel suspected members of drug cartels and criminal gangs without due process. That law allows for summary deportation of people from countries with which the United States is at war, that have invaded the United States, or that engage in predatory incursions. The Supreme Court has upheld past uses of the law in wartime, but its text seems to require a link to the actions of the foreign government, so it is not clear whether the justices will allow a president to stretch it to enormous drug cartel activity. More broadly, Mr. Miller said a new Trump administration would shift from the ICE practice of the arresting specific people to carrying out workplace raids and other sweeps in public places aimed at arresting scores of unauthorized immigrants at once. To make the process of finding and deporting documented immigrants already living inside the countries radically more quickly and efficient, he said, the Trump team would bring in, quote, the right kinds of attorneys and the right kind of policy thinkers willing to carry out such ideas. Well, that's just the vaguest language ever for people who are just insane clowns. Oh my God. Okay. And people, oh, sorry. And because of the magnitude of arrests and deportations being contemplated, they plan to build, quote, vast holding facilities that would function as staging centers for immigrants as their cases progress and they wait to be flown to other countries. Mr. Miller said a new camp would likely be built on open land in Texas near the border. He said the military would construct them under the authority and control of the Department of Homeland Security, while he cautioned that there were no specific blueprints yet. He said the camps would look professional and similar to the other facilities of migrants that have been built near the border. Such camps could also enable the government to speed up the pace and volume of deportations of undocumented people who have lived in the United States for years and are so not subject to fast-track removal. If pursuing the long, short effort to win permission to remain in the country would mean staying locked up in a interim some way, giving up the voluntary access, accept removal without going through the full process. The use of these camps, Mr. Miller said, would likely be focused more on single adults because the government cannot indefinitely hold children under a long-standing court order known as floor settlement. So any families brought to the facility would have to be moved in and out more quickly, he said. The Trump administration tried to overturn the floor settlement, but the Supreme Court did not resolve the matter because Mr. Trump's term ended. Mr. Miller said the Trump team would try again. To increase the number of agents available for ICE sweeps, Mr. Miller said officials from other federal law enforcement agencies would be temporarily resigned, and the state National Guard troops and local police officers, at least from willing Republican-led states, would be deputized from immigrant control efforts. While a law known as Posse Comitatus Act generally forbids the use of armed forces for law enforcement purposes, another law called the Insurrection Act creates an exception. Mr. Law would invoke the Insurrection Act at the border and enabling the use of federal troops to apprehend migrants, Mr. Miller said. Bottom line, he said, Mr. Trump will do whatever it takes. So we got looming economic decline in one of the most simplest ways. Like our founding fathers would even find this to be one of the most heinous things you could ever do to a country, especially one that needs immigrants. Anyways, so this is some good news. I'm not going to be going over this completely. Oh, what the heck? No. Oh, man. Okay, so I just exited out of that. So Colorado uh, is barring Trump from being in office, which I think is good, but I believe it's symbolic because because they're already Democratic, I believe. So it is sort of like a meaningless, like, we don't like you. So good news, I guess. Not this that's in front of you, obviously. All right. All right. Jesus Christ. Hopefully the rest of this year doesn't kill us because I really don't think 2024 is going to be good. Like, there's no plan for Biden, and either way, if Trump loses, we'll just get just a, a Trump stooge. Oh, actually, in other news, Ramaswamy, I guess, has dropped out because of what's happening to Trump, I guess, and he's trying to be like symbolic in that way or whatever. Like, who really cares about Ramaswamy? All right, see you guys. Happy New Year's, Merry Christmas, I guess. Peace.